Welcome to Lumina Convenings. Thank you for joining in our discussion. We hope you leave feeling inspired and motivated to continue learning about our mission. This year, our series theme is Spark a Shift. Through thoughtful, informative conversations, we will work toward creating real change and positively shifting the future of learning in America. At any time throughout this discussion, please utilize the live chat feature on the right side under the Stage tab for any questions or comments. This session is also being recorded and will be available on Lumina's website and YouTube channel in the future. Now let's get started.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Lumina Virtual Convening. This one is a conversation that we're having with LinkedIn and Microsoft on the work of the future. My name is Dominique Raymond, Domi for short. I'm a strategy director with Lumina Foundation. Lumina is a private foundation located in Indianapolis with the mission of making certain through our work that learning for all is available for those after high school. So I'm serving as your moderator today for the next 60 minutes, and I'm really excited about this conversation that we're having with LinkedIn and Microsoft. We do have a shared agenda, and this is around learning. And how is it that we can learn, and how does learning and working work together? So just the other part of it is you heard during the opening that what we're really after is sparking a shift in our conversation. Want to encourage you to chat. Again, the feature that's available through the platform. Please ask any questions you'd like, and we'll get to as many questions as we can. The other part is we'd love for you to ping us on social media around this. This is really around hashtag spark a shift. Great conversation scheduled for today. We're going to start off by listening in on a conversation with Karen Kimbrough. Karen is chief economist with LinkedIn, and she'll be talking with Lumina Foundation's president and CEO, Jamie Merisotis. And they'll be talking a lot about just really from labor market outcomes, training, all these pieces, and how COVID-19 has affected that greatly. We'll then hear from a student who actually has taken part in the Digital Skills Initiative that Microsoft Philanthropies has done. And once we've done that, then we're going to come back together, and what we'll do is we'll have another conversation, this time with Naria Santalucia from Microsoft Philanthropies and my colleague Chauncey Lennon. So really just very, very excited that so many of you have joined us. We have over 600 people registered for this event, which we think is wonderful and fabulous. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get started. Let's start off by listening in to the conversation between Karen Kimbrough and Jamie Merisotis. Be right back.
Hello and welcome to our event on navigating the future of work. I'm Jamie Merisotis, President and CEO of Lumina Foundation, and I'm delighted to be joined today for this conversation with Karen Kimbrough. Karen is the chief economist at LinkedIn. Karen's a celebrated expert in macroeconomics. She's deeply knowledgeable about capital markets, about labor and employment, and a host of other issues. Karen, welcome. Thank you very much for joining me for this fireside chat without a fire, I guess I would call it.
Well, yeah, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here and be part of this conversation, Jamie.
Thanks so much. You know, I think it's pretty clear that it's time to spark a shift in America's post-secondary education system. I think both LinkedIn, Microsoft, and Lumina Foundation are interested in making learning more accessible, helping to make it more equitable and applicable, and really looking forward to our conversation today in terms of how we individually and together might be able to address these issues. The conversation, of course, is taking place in the context of our shared interests, both in human work, in labor market outcomes, in credentials and digital skills, but also in the context of the fact that we're facing this unprecedented pandemic, and we've had an important, I think, awakening, a reckoning around racial injustice in our country that I think sets the backdrop for our conversation. So let me begin first, Karen, maybe by asking you a question about that backdrop of our work. Since March, we've seen that tens of millions of Americans have lost their jobs. Our unemployment rate has been at one point was at its highest point since the Great Depression. And, I know that LinkedIn regularly releases a jobs hiring report. Tell me maybe a key takeaway that you would offer from that report. And maybe is there a near-term bright spot or two for workers who are looking for jobs right now?
Sure. And, let me just say thanks again for starting off with the background context, because we are really at a crucial point, both in our society and also in our labor market. And, at LinkedIn, our vision is to create economic opportunity for every member of the global workforce. So that is across all the different boundaries that divide us. And one of the things that, we're watching right now is a recovery that is underway. We see it in our data, and we've seen it since, I want to say, late May, early June. It was pretty pronounced in the US at the beginning of the summer. And since then, that recovery really has leveled off. So we're continuing to recover broadly in aggregate across the US economy in terms of hiring, but it's slowing. The pace of improvement is clearly slowing. And I would even say that if I look at our real-time data, which is kind of a special thing that we have at LinkedIn, this real-time data of 700 million members, I can look across the U.S. and see that our hiring has shown really very minimal improvement since the middle of August. So there's definitely, I wouldn't call it a stalling, but definitely a slowing in the pace of recovery. And I think, not to end on a totally sort of downbeat, you asked, what are some bright spots? And here's a couple. We are seeing that there's some cities and metro areas that seem to be doing really well. A lot of what you might call secondary metro areas or tertiary ones. So Denver, Austin, Dallas, all kind of faring really well in terms of hiring pace. Certain industries are faring well and showing more resilience. Recently, retail has come back with the reopening of the economy, but real estate has been strong, probably because there are huge generational shifts just in terms of demand for housing as, an enormous number of millennials become at that stage where they're ready to have a family and live, independently. We have also very low rates, so that's supporting real estate. We have healthcare, which has been booming for obvious reasons as we sit in the middle of a pandemic, biotech, transport and logistics, because this is an economy where it's being transformed by the e-commerce and shopping online, and I think we should talk about that in a minute. So there's a lot of resilient sectors, and those are showing improvement. But I would be remiss if I didn't say that we're also seeing sectors that are struggling to kind of come back. And I think, education, anything related to state and local governments where funding has been a challenge, and they're having to kind of slow hiring or lay off. Entertainment, arts, energy, all those sectors are still challenged. So we have, it's a mix. It's not everybody's proceeding and recovering at the same pace. And that's probably the crux of everything you could say in America right now, is that things are happening at different paces for different people in different situations.
Exactly. So, I think that those differences that you see across different sectors is an important inflection point for our economy, for our country, when it comes to economic growth and prosperity. And, in particular, I think, one thing I'd love to hear your thoughts on is what's happening with the workers themselves and how workers are faring. Before this pandemic hit, there was a report from the Brookings Institution, and the report said that 53 million workers, 18 to 24 or 64-year-olds, it's about 44% of all workers, earned barely enough to live on. Their median earnings were $10.22 an hour, $18,000 a year. I think you and I can probably agree that was dreadful even before the pandemic. So now you add in the disproportionate impact we've seen of COVID on these same populations. Many of them are people of color, people working in some of those industries that you were talking about, hospitality, retail, et cetera. How do you think this seismic economic event we're facing now will influence that workforce maybe a generation from now?
And I'm totally in sync with you on the fact that there are, it's almost like a two-stage economy operating at different speeds, and that some of the earnings are just probably not sustainable. And that's, it's really important when you talk about jobs. First of all, we need to create jobs, right? And we need, because workers will be there, but they need to be good jobs, ideally higher quality jobs. And one of the things that we're seeing when we look at skills and workers is that everybody's agile. Everybody's trying to navigate this shock that we're in currently, but also the bigger underlying transformation that we're seeing as we move, towards an increasingly digital era. That's obvious. We can see from even the pandemic that all that did was just accelerate the move towards online for all businesses, whether they were serving people goods or services. So whether you were kind of ordering food from a restaurant or buying socks or whatever it may be, you were doing it online, and that will continue to some degree. I don't think that will ever go away. And so everybody needs an online presence, which means that when employers are looking for skills, they're looking for workers with digital fluency. They're looking for workers that no matter what the job is, there's an underlying element of digital literacy and fluency at a most basic level. So I don't mean coding, in Python. I mean being able to use whatever application or software is relevant for that job, be you a graphic designer or a machinist. And so it's really important that we bring people along so that they feel they have that digital fluency. And I think that's the most important, element. Even in healthcare, there's a huge move that we've seen online of people starting to showcase skills they have in telemedicine, or teachers showcasing skills on our platform around online learning and teaching and proficiency with the tools that are required for that. Those are, I think, really interesting and massive trends. I could tell you it's almost 500% to 1,000% increase in the number of people who are trying to either acquire those skills or are showcasing them on their profiles. We're also seeing a really big acceleration in workers that are looking for how to navigate this transition. And I think that's where we need to do more work. We need to make sure we are offering, and I say this as, corporate responsibility, ways for people to understand how they can navigate to those good quality jobs I mentioned. And I think that LinkedIn has data that can help shed light on, hey, if I have this constellation of skills, what's that one adjacent skill I could acquire without going back to school for 4 years full time, and pivot maybe to a sustainable career path that's a high quality job that's growing and expanding and maybe pays a living wage. And that's, I think, where the focus needs to be.
Yeah, and just to sort of amplify your point, maybe ask you a quick follow-up to that as a sort of segue here, which is, I know that, when it comes to LinkedIn and Microsoft, you've been working on these issues and you've thought a lot about who should be responsible for these things. You mentioned some of the things that you're thinking of doing. Obviously, government has a role, others have a role, but I'd love to hear you say maybe another word or two about who you think is responsible for getting the skills and training and retraining and how we make that work.
It's a bit of a kumbaya, but I think it's everyone. I would reject the argument that it's workers' responsibility to show up with exactly the right skill at exactly the right moment and, find exactly the right, employer. That's too much of a burden. That's an unfair ask. I think the right ask is distributed, where employers have to play a role in helping to skill the workforce and helping to create skills that are tangible, specific, and usable. I think that, policymakers and governments need to think about providing training that's, it's stackable, that it's credential based, but lets people kind of build them up and port them around. These are probably things I know you think a lot about and are familiar with, but we all have a role to play. And I just want to say that I think, to the extent that we can, for example, LinkedIn, start to move towards, assessment-based hiring as opposed to just credentials, meaning instead of just demanding that someone have a certain degree, you could say, we just want to assess your skills in this area. And if you have them, and this is something we're doing at LinkedIn, if you have them, we'll guarantee you an interview. And that's a project we've piloted. And it allows us to kind of cast a wider net to pull in more people who maybe aren't traditionally, equipped with that college or master's degree, but have relevant skills. And I think that's part of the process, is for, corporates to kind of push themselves out of their comfort area and be much more thoughtful and intentional about casting that wider net and, moving towards assessments.
Yeah, well said.
So this is I would love to ask you a couple of questions, Jamie, if you're game for it.
I'm game.
Fantastic. So, I was speaking of training and kind of a need for a higher level, rethink of it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on how we should be, rethinking higher learning and workforce training programs. From where you sit, can this COVID-19 crisis force us to be bolder? Do you think that there are changes that, particularly you want to, call out that are, could be adopted in the wake of this crisis?
I think so. And I just want to key off of something you said earlier, which is, this is a point I've been trying to make in many of my talks over the last few months, which is that, there's a lasting effect of, I call it the year like no other. And I think the year like no other 2020 is going to endure for decades. I also think, Karen, it'd be wrong to say, COVID-19 and this sort of renewed interest in understanding or grappling with racial injustice is somehow a surprise. I think the racial injustice and the fact that we're dealing with COVID, that context that you and I have been talking about, reflects societal failure. It's a sort of devastating trifecta. We've been neglecting our environment, our economic approach, our political approach. We've been sort of neglecting inequality for a very long time. And, I think all of those things have played a part in what's gone wrong. And I think these things are going to accelerate because of COVID, because of the urgency of achieving that racial and social justice. And, but at the end of the day, I think that we are probably moved by this profound sense that in this world of cascading failure, we have to return to who we are as humans. My new book, Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines, gets at this point because I think we need to better connect to each other and to ourselves in this time of crisis. So, what are we going to do? First of all, I think everybody, not just a fortunate few, has to have the opportunity to develop their knowledge, skills, and abilities. That's one way we push back on what we've seen because of COVID and the context within which it operated. So, I think we have a challenge there because I think educators and our education system are both the opportunity and the headwinds when it comes to that, right? Because changing the system is hard and getting them to change the system will be hard, but I think it's really important that we do that. So I think educators are going to have to question almost all of the assumptions that have guided the development of our current students. And, I think that we have to focus in particular on the success of all students. This is an issue that I think we've also neglected. In higher ed, this is going to be a big change. We have many outdated attitudes about student success and failure and what that looks like. I think we all have a stake in the success of today's students because they're increasingly diverse. They represent what our future is about, and they really are those human workers of the future. And my final point might be that we've really got to focus on what they learn, and this I think gets to your point about skills, which is that we don't just want them to show up for a program of study and finish it. We actually want them to learn something, that they've actually got to know and be able to do things with what they've gotten out of that program. So the outcomes of those learning programs have to be clear and demonstrable to everybody. Content knowledge is important, math and science and arts and literature, but they also have to be equipped with the learning that will make them successful as human workers, compassion and empathy and ethics. Those are the things that I think are going to be really important as we prepare people for this future.
Oh, so well said. I feel like you're speaking my heart. I'm constantly saying, I think the future is both digital and human. So I'm thrilled to hear your thoughts on this. If I can, I'll ask you one more question, Jamie. I know, time is short and the agenda has to move on, but, new technology and automation have been changing the way we work. But this moment, we're really seeing this acceleration of change. And so do you have thoughts on what the private sector specifically should be doing and how should we be working with partners differently at this stage?
It's a great question. And let me just hit three quick points on this because I think that I've thought a lot about this. One is we've got to take risk. Risk is really important to innovation. And here, I mean, both your world and my world, we have to take risk both in the corporate sector and in the philanthropic sector. Take the risk that others won't take. We can't expect government to take that risk. We're going to have to take that risk because they don't have the capacity to do that. We also should take a long view of this. I think that we do have immediate results. COVID and racial injustice are examples of things that require immediate attention. But, at the end of the day, your company, my foundation, lots of other entities, we can actually invest for the long term because we have a long-term view of what it's going to take to make our organizations, our communities, our country successful. And, I think we've got to be really clear about what our goals are. We've got to aim at goals that I think are attainable. The private sector, again, meaning the corporate sector and philanthropy together, could move the needle substantially in this equation around, navigating this future of work. But we can do it better together. So coming together, I think we could actually address many of these problems and then give government the tools that it needs to create the scale that it's best able to serve. At the end of the day, I think we will end up in this environment where American society will be better economically, socially, and culturally if we make those investments. But as you pointed out, it's a shared venture, and the outcomes have to be shared as well.
So well said.
Well, our time ran so short here, Karen. I really want to thank you so much for this conversation. It's just been wonderful to have this opportunity to talk about the future of work. Karen and I are going to probably do like a road show. We could do this every few weeks and have 20-minute chats about different topics. It would be so fun. But I'm really thrilled that we've had a chance to have this conversation. Thank you so much for joining us, and looking forward to working with you in the future.
Same here. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for having me, Jamie.
Oh man, everyone. I don't know about you, but I love that conversation. It was amazing. I mean, it touched on so many things. It touched on COVID. We got to hear from leaders in the field, just thinking about the learner and about really just how America needs to move forward. I was just so excited by it, and I hope you all were too. Want to encourage you to continue to chat about it. We're certainly going to try and answer as many questions as we can during the second portion. And definitely we'll follow up with some questions. If you want to reach out to us, you can certainly do that. Our website has a form. You can put information in there. Just reach out to us. We'd love to continue that conversation. So I want to again thank Karen Kimbrough and Jamie Marasotis for the first half of this webinar. So listen, it's all about the learner, people. Love everything that Jamie and Karen said, and we'll definitely love everything that Chauncey and Naria are about to say. But it is learning matters and the learner matters. And with that in mind, we wanted to have you hear from a student. Microsoft is doing some great work around digital skills. And so this student video, I think, is really moving. We'll be right back with you in a little bit to talk about everything with Naria and Chauncey, but first the student video. Thanks.
I grew up on the north side of Chicago in Cabrini Green Housing Project. So tech definitely was something that I didn't see growing up. When I first joined IC Stars, I was recently laid off and I was forced to move back in with my mother along with my 3 children. That was a really low point for me. Learning the tech at IC Stars was difficult for me at first. I wanted to give up so many times, but luckily the support was there, juggling being a mother, learning those tech skills. Once I was able to do that, I knew I could do anything else. Right now, I've been studying for the Microsoft SQL course. It's something that I can add on to my list of skill sets. The tech skills I have learned, I feel like I have more job opportunities. So I am better prepared to go into any field or any job that I decide to. A year ago, I never would have thought that I would be in this place. It's just been a big weight lifted off my shoulders. It feels amazing to have my children watch me succeed. I've wanted nothing more for them to have those positive examples growing up that I did not have. So me, trying my best and pushing through is the perfect example for them.
Well, okay, I'm floating. I'm energized by Tiara's video, and I hope all of you are too. And I'm just very excited to continue our conversation today around just skills and all the pieces that we've talked about so far. So I want to open it up and introduce two people I'm going to moderate their discussion. They're here with me live. We're starting off with Naria Santalucia. Naria is the General Manager for Digital Inclusion with Microsoft Philanthropies, and my colleague Chauncey Lennon, who normally is like right down the hallway from me, but we're in different cities today. Chauncey Lennon is our VP for Learning and Work. And so welcome to both of you as part of this great discussion. We've got so much to cover, but I know we don't have a lot of time. So I thought what we would do is narrow our conversation around two things. And it's talking about skills, which I know is a really big bucket. And then the other part of it to me is really around racial equity and how do skills and racial equity and everything fit in, because we know both of our organizations as well as LinkedIn have really strong commitments for both. So to start off with, I start with you, Naria. Could you share with us a little bit of the work that Microsoft Philanthropies and Microsoft in general is doing around skills? We know you're particularly doing work around the COVID-19 pandemic and the response to that. Could you share a little bit with us about that?
Absolutely. And first of all, thank you, Domi, so much. Thank you to Lumina for, including us in this important conversation. I love this theme of sparking a shift. I mean, this is really a critical piece. And if we can all act together, I think we will truly have a different economy and an inclusive and more equitable economy and recovery. But first of all, I just really enjoyed the conversation with Jamie and Karen. So many great nuggets there, like you pointed out. But also, for me, I feel like 2020, I'm sure many of you agree on the call, it has been one, right? I mean, come on, it keeps coming and it won't stop. And during the times when I feel especially down or like, how are we going to really push through? I think of students like Tiara, who faced so much more adversity than, it wasn't just the pandemic, it was like adversity consistently and always. And yet she was able to reskill, push through, have that brighter future for herself, but really for her children too. So I just, that story is super inspiring. You asked kind of about what we're doing at Microsoft. And I think one of the key things is this truly has been a year like none other, like Jamie said. We are in a situation where, this is the most challenging time in multi-generations. We had the pandemic, economic crisis, the racial reckoning, so much going on. And at one point, we did some calculations internally at Microsoft, and we realized that about 250 million people globally during the lockdown were unemployed. Now, some were already unemployed, but some had been furloughed and lost their job. That's a ton of people. So we thought, how could we pull together the resources that we have to help individuals who are impacted and who are struggling now? And the lens that we really used and thought about was to partner with LinkedIn, as well as our partners GitHub, to say, what are the current skills? What are the roles that we know are growing now, they're in demand now, growing in the future, attainable by somebody who may or may not have an advanced degree in that specific field, and they're going to result in a living family wage role. And so with that, we pulled 10 different role paths together, and I would encourage everyone to check this out in the expo where we have material. But there are 10 roles that are digitally fluent, like Karen was saying at its anchor, but not necessarily tech jobs. And then 3 roles within those 10 that are tech focused, that we, the IT administrator, data analyst, and software engineer, that we definitely know will grow, especially in this age of extreme digital transformation. So we pulled all that together. We've made it available for free, and any learner can go and start at opportunity.linkedin.com. So, I think that's just a call for everybody. If you know of anyone impacted, if you're at a nonprofit and you're skilling individuals, it is all there for you for free to learn and skill. And in addition to those 10 role paths, we have really critical soft skills, quote unquote. I like to call them power skills. Those, horizontal skills like the empathy, communication, job search skills as well. So, definitely just an open invitation to go check out that expo, because all of that is there. So really that's our first kind of breath motion to help many. And I hope, people will find that useful. And that's kind of some of the things that we have going on right now.
Wow, Maria, that's so exciting, and actually is fully aligned with a lot of the work that we're now. Before I jump to Chauncey, is there a deadline for the free of it? I think it goes into next year, or does it end this year? Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yes, so all of this content is made available for free through March 31st, and that is a lot of the LinkedIn Learning content, which is fabulous and so great. I'm actually always, I started actually one of the learning paths for project management, and it's been really great and super consumable and easy to learn. And then the Microsoft, we have some additional kind of products and technology skilling that goes deeper that will be available, in perpetuity. And actually, one thing that I neglected to mention that is very important is we talked about those stackable credentials and signaling to employers. So 2 things here. When you complete a LinkedIn Learning Path, you could get a certificate of completion. You could put that onto your LinkedIn profile. And the other piece is that we've made employer industry recognized certifications on our Microsoft products available for just $15. And there are 5 of the fundamental ones, as well as 8 of the role-based certifications. So definitely also worth checking out. Really, I think, high value currency for job seekers who want to enter into a new career path.
Wow, Daria, thank you. Talk about a segue to Chauncey. This is perfect because we actually at Lumina, as many know, we have a data set called Stronger Nation. Earlier this year with our colleague Courtney Brown, she talked about how we're including certificates as well as certifications, and that our work is really focused a lot on short-term credentials as well as all the way to the baccalaureate. So Chauncey, I'm wondering if you can chime in here, especially the employer pieces and the like. Please share.
Thrilled to be part of this conversation. One thing I thought would be useful to do would be let's look at some of the lessons from Tiara's incredible story, because I think they speak to the important role of not just one actor, the student, the learner, but to all actors. As Karen mentioned, this is really about bringing a whole set of stakeholders into a new set of behaviors. So, we have Tiara, a learner who's highly motivated to develop new kinds of skills. But we also have a couple other important pieces to the story, right? We have the fact that the program existed. We have a high quality program that's giving students flexible, affordable, occupationally aligned credentials. In this case, certifications. But it's not just even that, right? It's also the fact that that program was really created by an employer who is committed to giving a real clear signal about what they were looking for. One of the challenges we face, not just in short-term credentials, but in essentially all kinds of credentials, is if they don't actually connect to what employers are looking for, they aren't really going to get you where you want to go when it comes to your career. And so we need employers to do a better job of really sketching out those pathways. And Naria described how making it transparent to workers that certain kinds of roles, certain kinds of occupations are connected to certain kinds of credentials. They're organized, they sort of come in a sequence. Some of them are more foundational. Some of them are more horizontal or soft skills or foundational skill based. All that's really hard to figure out if this isn't what you do every day. And making the effort to make these opportunities kind of clear and transparent is also essential. And then one other thing I would add is that you saw in that incredible video that there's also supports. The program is designed around student success. It's not simply, go out there and make your way through this on your own. It's that we think about programs built in a way, whether you're like Tara and you've got 3 young kids, or some other kind of worker who's got family obligations, transportation, childcare, a whole world of other life commitments that often make it very hard to stay focused and stay moving towards a credential. And so the program itself recognizes the need for supports as students navigate both the academic and non-academic challenges. So I think when you bring all those together, you get the kinds of employment credentials that we need to see more and more of. We need more programs like this, whether they're coming from employers who are recognizing the need to build a workforce that can serve their own needs, or employers who recognize that given the kinds of products they're selling, they need a credentialed workforce that can help other companies use those products, or community colleges. The 9 million students who are at community colleges are the largest portion of the post-secondary landscape. Many of those students are there looking for the kind of occupational credentials that will help them get into the labor market today and find the good jobs that will lead to stable careers. And so I think what's been so sort of exciting about this is to see how Tara's story connects so many of the themes we've been talking about so far.
That's awesome, Chauncey. And man, again, I feel like we need like 3 hours of conversation. I know we don't have that kind of time, but the interesting thing is we know skilling has always been part of the conversation for all of us that have been doing this work. And we also know this idea of racial equity has always been the focus really since the history of the US, right? But recently, the two have come together in a way, as a colleague of ours likes to say, it's moved both from urgency to emergency. So, COVID-19, the pandemic, moved skilling and making certain people are ready for work and can work. We know with really BLS data, the Occupational Outlook just came out this month that, there's an anticipation that there will be more need for workers. So that's all related to the pandemic. Racial reckoning begins in 2020 with the murder of George Floyd. And both of our organizations, as well as I understand LinkedIn, have really gone from, again, urgency to emergency as we work on what's the solution we can do. Karen touched a little bit on it. Jamie definitely did as well. And so Naria, I wanted to just get your insights on what Microsoft is doing. I know that you have an initiative underway to look at racial equity, and wanted your insights on that.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is such an important topic. And I think it's a great opportunity that we need to, racial equity, it's on the top of everyone's mind, and we need to make sure it stays there and that we dismantle racist systems together. One of the things, all up at Microsoft, there was a commitment by Satya Nadella, our CEO, to really think about how we are addressing racial injustice in the US. And there's a 3-part approach that Microsoft's really taking. The first one is, what are we doing within our walls? How are we making sure that we are recruiting and promoting Black and African American employees? We're thinking about our business practices and who are we contracting with? Are they, diverse suppliers? Are there Black and African American owned businesses, as well as the use of our capital? And then finally, we're thinking about societal impact. And this is kind of where our team within philanthropies and within our community and external legal affairs gets to really play a role and try to help and step in. And our work on the societal impact is really anchoring on a few things. The first one is connectivity, and just that digital access to digital broadband, especially in populations that may be urban, dense areas where there is connectivity, but how do we make that affordable for all, especially for Black and African American communities? So my colleague Vicki Robinson leads on that work, very important. We're also thinking about how can we influence and impact using kind of the skills and technology that we have with data on justice reform. And so very excited about kind of all of that work and how we can especially use data analysis to recommend and influence policy in that space and programming as well. And then finally, kind of where, you know, we think about my work intersecting a lot is in skills, right? Because, you know, people keep saying COVID is disproportionately impacting people of color. Well, it's not like, you know, the disease itself is targeting certain individuals. It's the conditions that exist that make that become more of a, have that impact. And you know, workforce economic opportunity, that really, really plays a role. So we're very excited to design with community at the table a new grant program called the Community Skills Program. The grant application is open right now. It'll close on September 30th. And we are looking for 50 nonprofit organizations that are led by and serving Black and African American communities around workforce development and specifically digital skilling. These nonprofits will receive cash grants of up to $100,000 a year for 3 years, so up to $300,000, as well as leadership development and then technology enablement services. So the application is open now. I think that's in the expo too, but I'll give the aka.ms/community-skills-application. But you can find that in the expo. If you are a nonprofit leader, or if you know of one that should apply, please do so. We're really excited about this new program and this new effort.
This is great. And Chauncey, Naria, that's amazing. And yeah, we'll push it out as well afterwards. We want to, Chauncey, you know, equity is at the center of everything Lumina does. Just want to, before you answer that question, want to encourage people to keep putting questions in the chat. Notice we've gotten some already, so this is great. So Chauncey, what are your thoughts?
So, you know, one thing I want to point out is that access to high quality short-term credentials, certificates, certifications, you know, occupational associate's degrees, this is a racial justice and equity issue, right? I think we don't often step back and understand that the majority of post-secondary students are in these programs. The majority of those students are students of color, low-income students, adult students, and ensuring that we build stronger community colleges. We build programs that are designed to get people the kinds of skills and credentials that get them into good jobs. That is going to be one of the key racial justice and equity issues we face over the next couple of years. That was true before COVID, but COVID has only exacerbated and sort of accelerated the importance now of ensuring that workers who want a credential that is flexible, that is affordable, that is tied to a good job, that we have those kinds of opportunities there. That they are reaching the millions. We have 36 million adults who have some college but no degree. We have 50 million adults who have just high school diplomas. Those are disproportionately workers of color. And providing these kinds of credentials in programs that are high quality, provide supports, and ensure a good job is one of the key issues we face when it comes to racial justice going forward.
That's super quick. That your answer is spot on as always, Chauncey. You know, so this is great. So we have a couple of questions in the queue. This first one is for you, Chauncey, from Kevin. I'm assuming not our Kevin, because you know. But anyway, it says, how are our recent college graduates going to stand up against their peers who may have more experience and are fighting for the same roles? So what are your thoughts on that?
I think, sure. Obviously, whenever the labor market tightens up, workers coming in have a harder time. I think this goes to the question of transparency and helping people navigate around in-demand credentials. We need to have better information so people can understand what the labor market looks like, where demand is, and what credentials are essential to getting demand. As Karen mentioned in the earlier part of the conversation, we live in a world now where it's not so much one degree and then a job is waiting. It's often building a constellation of different kind of credentials. Maybe it's a degree and a certification. Maybe it's a cluster of certifications and certificates. But to do that requires a whole lot of understanding about pathways, about labor market demand. And that's where we need to build whole new generations of technology. LinkedIn is beginning to show people this, but we need more and more of those kinds of resources. So students aren't so narrowly focused in on jobs where if the labor market shifts, there's a lot of other people in front of them in line. There are plenty of opportunities, but we can't get people there unless we help them navigate towards them.
Super. Can I chime in On that
Yes,
question
please.
too, Jamie, if that's okay. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
this is something that is definitely keeping me up at night, because we know from, data that college graduates who graduate into recessions have, depressed lifetime earnings. And I think in the last kind of recession, we saw this happen. And I'm, very fearful of what could happen as this economy continues to turn and it's, getting to depression levels. I think that there's something that we all should really think about as far as employers goes too. Last summer, I think a lot of employers had to cancel internship programs, had to cancel some of their, offers that were out there. And I just want to put out a call to any employer to, if you can, this is such an important, like it is the foundation of our workforce to make sure that we have young people with that opportunity so that they can continue progressing. Let's play the long game here. Let's keep those programs going. If we can't fund it, like, is there a different way that we can keep giving that work-based experience and connection to students? And also, could the government, could states and policymakers really step in and say, hey, we're going to give you some relief if you keep these programs up and running? I think it's really, really important that we do have that long game in mind.
Absolutely. I couldn't agree. I mean, I just couldn't agree more. And the important thing here is it's for all business, small, medium, large size businesses, that internships and having that role there is critically important for the learner, because the learner is a worker learner in most cases, we know, with working adults that are out there. We have another question open to either of you. It's actually a comment we received from a gentleman named Daniel. He wants to know, for those of us in post-secondary education, do you believe thoughtfully designed competency-based courses can help students and workers convey the skills they've acquired? Who'd like to go first? Chauncey, you want to take that? Or
I'll jump in. I want to go back to a theme that we actually started today with, which is that there's lots of variation in the labor market, right? There's variation when it comes to employment, as we're seeing now, as we try to work our way out of the sort of COVID recession. But that's true when it comes to how employers think about skills. And so the first question you have to always ask is, well, some industries, some sectors, some kinds of employers do better around things like skills-based hiring. We want to sort of understand that and help students understand, where skills without credentials might be, the labor market works better with those. But I think we also then want to think about how we take employers who are open to the idea of not simply relying, especially on just degrees, and think about how we build their ability to look beyond, especially the degree, but understand that credentials, they represent skills, and there are many workers who haven't had a chance to get those skills kind of measured in the form of a credential, and there's opportunities there for employers to find the kind of workers they're looking for. But there's a lot of work to be done there, so I don't want to be Pollyanna about this, but we have seen some promising changes and hopefully more to come.
very good. Naria, did you want to add anything to that, or we can go to the...
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. And I absolutely agree with everything that Chauncey just said. And, I think one of the things is, yes, to directly answer the question, absolutely, competency-based courses can help students, really signal those skills. I think the more that employers can join at the table equitably, again, not just at their alumni associations or like through the, university and college systems that already get access to companies. But if we can think of a way to equitably pass along that information about these are the skills that we're looking for, these are the competencies, that would be even better. But I also don't want to, shift. I think like the choice is always the best option, right? Some students are going to want to continue to get the post-secondary degree. Some students may not. Some students may start and then stop and come back to that stackable credential. So let's make sure that we be bold and try all of those things. I think it's just my editorial on that question.
No, it's all good. It's all good. Really, just again, access to learning and just making it available to all is what we're really after. We have one more question in the chat we're going to take, but before I give you the question, I'd like you all to just start thinking about this whole conversation, this whole hour has been around sparking a shift, right? So this has all been spark. Want to hear from you and your final thoughts around the shift. So here's our final question. if we are looking at racial injustice, should we start looking at our secondary education system that prepares individuals to take advantage of the post-secondary opportunities? Yes, of course. But go ahead. Chauncey, do you want to take that, or Naria? Who wants to start?
Let's let
Okay,
Naria, you take that.
Sure, I could start this one. I would say yes. I mean, listen, I don't think there is a single system in the United States that does not have racist practices in its history that are pervasive and continuing forward. And I think that that is very, very true, maybe even more so for the post-secondary education system than even, obviously the K through 12 system as well, but it continues to grow and stack on each other as you go more and more up the higher education chain. So I think we do need to take a wholesale look at it. Like prior to joining Microsoft, I ran a scholarship program in Washington State that had a specific mission ensuring low and middle income students get access to STEM degrees, kind of with that in mind, like, Washington employers are really hiring STEM graduates. And what we really pressed and what we really found to be true was that there were so many talented young people around the state that were from diverse backgrounds, first in their family to go to college, that just didn't have the chance because of, their family circumstance and their condition, all, issues of systemic racism that needed to be addressed. And that program is now graduating students. They were being employed at 91% plus after graduation. So this is possible, but it will take that, Karen and Jamie mentioned this too, a wholesale systemic approach, employers, governments, universities, colleges themselves really saying, we're going to put a stake in the ground and change these practices and get to systemic equity.
Chauncey, anything to add there?
Sure. One point I would just add on, in addition to that, is that, I think when we look at the many, many forms of, sort of racial inequality that we see in our secondary system, one of them we should really be calling out is that the system is designed around a kind of BA or bust mentality. And that also contributes and exacerbates the kind of racial inequities we see. A better system is one that is going to give multiple pathways for students from high school, whether they go on directly to a 4-year degree, they do a 2-year degree, or they go get a credential. Everybody should have the opportunity to do some learning post-high school. We want a world in which there are no racial gaps when we look at those different types of learning post-high school, but we can't continue to believe that the system, which is only about one kind of post-high school credential, the BA, is a system that's really going to get us to the kind of equal outcomes we're looking for.
Wow, this is, again, I need 3 more hours with both of you, but we're coming at the end of this webinar. So before your final thoughts, I'm going to go ahead and do a really important plug for our next event. We actually, what Jamie didn't mention, or he might have mentioned it, is he actually has authored another book. This one is called Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines. And it touches on a lot of the things around how do you connect humans and skills. That's going to be on October 6th. So look for more information on that. You can also hit our website, luminafoundation.org. We'll have it in the expo, as well as his website, jamiemarisotis.com, for information. So please join us for that and future ones. Chauncey's going to be on one on community colleges and equity in November. We have a big state policy retreat that's happening in October. December, we'll talk about recognition and skills. So many webinars. I'm so excited. But really, let me get it back to this conversation. This was great and important because pinned under that is really, again, we're trying to spark into a shift. Skills, racial equity, all the pieces that we have. Naria, I'll go to you for final thoughts. You've just shared some wonderful work that Microsoft is doing. What should people do with that information? What's the shift that needs to happen there?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think the shift, I mean, there's a simple call to action of like, go learn, take advantage of the content, make sure that people who are struggling right now or, you know, want a different path for the future kind of go and leverage that content. So that's one shift. But if I might just say, you know, one of the things that I really within philanthropies and I think within Microsoft broadly too is like, how can we shift the way that we do our work and our practice? And the one shift that's really top of mind right now is thinking about racial equity, and when we're making grants and we're engaging in community, like, are they at the table in a really big way? Are they the ones that are you know, promoting solutions? Are we really elevating their voice? And we've done things for hundreds of years in a certain way with like systems and people at the table. I think it's time for us to shift the table and shift the place settings and get the people that really have the solutions within them to be there as well as a decision maker.
Wow, well said. The best, you know, what I loved about everything. I loved everything you said, but it also, this idea that we're not suggesting our participants are the only ones that need to shift. We ourselves need to shift, right? And so with that, Chauncey, you get the final thought. What's the shift that has to happen?
Sure. So I think we need many shifts, but one that I would put at the top of the list is we need to shift how we think about what post-secondary success looks like. We think too much about the role of the VA. VAs matter, and they're importantly powerful tools for many people, but we need to recognize that other credentials, whether they're 2-year degrees or certificates or certifications, are also important, critical components of how we're going to help millions of Americans get back on their feet, get back into the labor market, and move forward into stable, successful careers.
Wow, well said. You know, can I just say thank you to you both? Let me just say thank you with a big old shout out. Thank you, Naria Santalucia, not only for taking part in this conversation, but really even kickstarting this idea of this virtual event. We just thought it was like critical and sound and on top of things. So thank you, Naria. Chauncey Lennon, you're amazing, as you know. And so I just want to thank you for taking part in this. We also obviously want to thank Karen Kimbrough, who's chief economist with LinkedIn, and then Jamie Marasotis, Lumina Foundation's president and CEO, our boss at Lumina, and author of the book, Human Work in the Age of Smart Machines. So invite everyone on this platform to please continue to use hashtag #SparkAShift. To continue the conversation offline, on socials. You can also reach out to us at Lumina, at Microsoft, at LinkedIn. We've got all that stuff in the expo. And let's continue that conversation, and let's go ahead and build a coalition to make skilling, racial equity, all the pieces we talked about today better for everyone. So thank you for your time, everyone. And we look forward to you participating in our next virtual event. Thank you. Thanks, Naria. Thanks, Chauncey.
Thank you.
Thank you.